All right. So can everybody see the screen? Awesome. Okay, so this is the Career Series 3. This is interview tips from technical recruiters who are professional software engineers. And so we're looking to get all the information from them and to help out the current students who are looking to get some tips from the professionals and people who know what they're talking about, and hopefully help out because Expo just finished up. If you're a current IEEE member, please sign in with the QR code in the top right or the tiny URL up top. And so I'm just going to go through a little bit about the format of the event. So first of all, we're going to do a brief introduction from IEEE and ECAC, and then Michael is going to introduce our panelists, and then the main portion is going to be career questions, which is going to be about 35 minutes where screen share will be turned off, and I'll be moderating the event by asking questions that we came up beforehand to help you guys understand exactly what you need to get out of the event, and also what these technical recruiters and professional software engineers can help you with transitioning from student life to professional life, and a little bit about their experiences. So that's going to be for about 35 minutes. Screen share be off, and then the engineers are going to go over about 2 interview questions as a team to help you show exactly what they're looking for when you do technical problems. And that's going to be 2 separate questions. And then for an optional portion, both for the panelists and the students, it's going to be a 30-minute Q&A, just an open Q&A. And since we have a pretty small group, it's going to be a nice intimate moment where you can ask questions directly to the panelists and hear all the questions that you have answered specifically for your scenario. And so, and if the panelists, you need to leave at that point, no worries. I'm sure the IEEE officers would also love to help answer any questions if you have them. Just briefly, the Career Series is an initiative with IEEE and ECAC. And so IEEE is a professional organization for professional development, career development, academic, social, and leadership development led by students on campus. And then I'll pass it over to Michael to introduce ECAC and then introduce the panelists.
Thank you, Jacob. My name is Michael Powell. I am the director of the Engineering Career Center. First of all, I want to thank Jacob and his fellow officers for doing this series. This is event number 3 that's been done. And I'm quite happy and that he is moderating this one, because I think he will do a fantastic job, and you will therefore have to hear less from me. And I promise you will not hear too much from me tonight, because I'm about to turn it over to our panelists, who I also appreciate very much because they are alumni. We have 2 alumni of the School of Engineering and an alum from computer science. And they are, I really appreciate them taking their time and making time to I think, prepare for this event in terms of some things that they wanted to share with you, and also just for making the time to be here, because they do have day jobs. And I'm happy to be seeing them again, because I haven't really gotten to interact with all of them as much since they were students. So without further ado, though, I am going to turn it over to them. I want them to introduce themselves a little bit. Nice short and sweet introduction to go with what you already know. And then Jacob will probably take it from there, and we'll be on our way. So maybe just to make it easier, I'm going to kind of go in the order that I'm seeing their pictures on the screen. We'll start with Juan, and then Helen, and then Travis, if you all would take turns introducing yourself.
Yeah, sure. So, hey everyone, my name is Juan Cortez. I went to UT from 2010 to 2015, majored in electrical engineering. Most of my time at UT, I focused my career on electrical internships, but it wasn't until I went to my first full-time job at IBM that I really started getting heavily invested in front-end development. So any questions about front end, you can tailor them and direct them towards me. But I have worked at IBM, Microsoft, Postmates, and RigUp during my professional, I guess, career. And during that time, I have been an interviewer for each one of those companies. A lot of my interviewing has been very heavy towards front-end questions with a little bit of leak coding. So I can kind of give some insight when it comes to the other types of questions that get asked in interviews. And that's all I will share right now. I'll pass it over to Helen.
Hi, everyone. I'm Helen. I also went to UT around the same time Juan did. I was 2010 to 2014. While in school, I did 3 internships, and they gradually went from heavy, more software-focused companies. So I started at Silicon Labs in Austin, then went to Cisco in the Bay Area, and then Box, and then ended up going back to Box full-time, and now I'm working at Instacart. And so at Box and at Instacart, I've been interviewing pretty much the whole time. So most of my interviews are the initial phone screens. Also have done some system design oriented questions or kind of general algorithms. Yeah, I guess that's it for me. Travis?
Yeah, thanks, Helen. Yeah, so my name is Travis. I graduated UT in 2008. My major was computer science, and then I interned at HomeAway, which is like a Austin startup company, kind of like a Airbnb, not as big though. But and then I interned at Visa, and then I converted from an intern at Visa to a full-time employee. Yeah, I primarily focus on back-end development. And then as a member of Visa, I've done some interviews for our team. So interviews for interns and then full-time hires, and then yeah, phone interviews, and then in-person whiteboarding sessions and stuff like that. And that's it for me.
Awesome. So now I'm going to transition to the Q&A portion. And so this is going to be pretty much, I'm going to stop the screen share to have it so you can see the full response in full screen. So it's not just taking up all your real estate here. I'll try to start with relatively easier questions, and then depending on how it goes, I'll just kind of judge it and see how difficult, I guess. But Michael saw these questions beforehand, so I hope that none of these are too hard, depending on if they are, you could just blame Michael, not me, totally. So I think I'll be totally fine. All right, so I'm gonna stop the screen share, and then we can get going with the questions. So the very first one is, why did you choose software engineering?
Cool. I guess I can kind of kick it off. When I was in high school, I actually was in an engineering program. And in my time there, we spent 4 years kind of dissecting different types of engineering activities, such as civil engineering, architectural. And the one that I liked the most out of all of them was electrical engineering. So that's kind of what kicked me into getting into software engineering. And like I mentioned, during my time in college, I focused, 2 of my internships were in electrical. And then I figured out, I was like, man, this sucks. I don't really like electrical engineering. So I did an internship with Toshiba, and they exposed me to front end. And I was like, oh, this is cool. I get to do a little bit more programming versus in C, it can be very tedious and hard to work with bits. So that's my very long story of how I got into software.
I guess I can go next. So yeah, I did take computer science in high school. Both my parents are actually software engineers, so I think it was sort of always in the back of my mind that this is probably something I could do. And then yeah, I think I started in electrical engineering, but then freshman year, it was didn't have enough experience to really get a hardware internship, so kind of found something in more the software realm just because I had taken classes before. And then yeah, I just realized I really enjoyed software way more than hardware, so kind of gradually shifted over in that direction.
Yeah, I can go ahead and go next. Yeah, so I think that I kind of got exposed to it in high school as well. So in high school, I think the very first course I took was a networking course, and then it was something with, we had to program routers or something like that. So it was network oriented, but then we had this programming bit, and that was really interesting to me. And so I actually liked the programming part rather than the networking concepts. And then so yeah, I decided to major in computer science, and then yeah, and then that's a lot of programming there. And then I think from that, the transition was just to become a software developer. So.
Awesome. I definitely saw the notes on kind of less things go wrong with software than hardware, right? It kind of, I felt that same thing. I first thought I wanted to do hardware, but then I was like, no, too many things could go wrong. I like how software, you can kind of just sit in one place. So just a few notes for the audience. Definitely, we encourage you to turn on your camera if you're comfortable with that. You don't have to. Also, feel free to ask questions in the chat as we are taking questions live, so we can pull them both from our question bank and then also live questions. So if you have any burning questions, anything about their experience or anything at all about recruiting, please feel free to send that in the chat as it's going. Highly encouraged. And then also for the panelists, feel free that everybody answers the question, but don't feel any pressure if you don't want to answer that question, and then we can just go to the next one. So moving on to the next question. So how often at your company do you play the mentor versus the mentee role in your current position?
That's a good question. I can go into it. So whenever I'm at work, differentiating between mentor and mentee, I see myself being a mentor a lot when I do when I lead my teams. Whenever you lead the teams, there's a lot of communication that needs to happen with like designers, data scientists, your PM, and of course the team that reports under me. So whenever the whole process of creating new features comes up, there's a lot of mentoring that happens to the younger engineers. Younger engineers have problems thinking about the very minute details versus the kind of like the greater problems. So that's where a lot of the mentorship that I provide comes into play. And now where does it come into play for me being a mentee? And I am not that old in my career. I've only been working for 5 years. And when you're working with these bigger problems, the architecture of your software is very important, especially when you want your application to scale or you want your application to be secure. You need to ensure that you have someone that can mentor you in those types of skills. I am an expert when it comes to front end, but if you try to ask me to secure my endpoints in the most efficient manner, I probably don't know. So it's a pretty good balance of like being a mentor versus a mentee for the type of job that I do.
For me, I think right now I sort of play more of a mentor role just because I've been at the company for about 2.5 years, but most of the people on my team have joined like within the last year. So like I have a lot more context on the code base or just like kind of what different teams are involved or just basically like more context, like deeper understanding of our current infrastructure. So definitely a lot of helping out like both younger engineers and also newer engineers to kind of get the ropes. But yeah, in terms of being a mentee, I feel like have conversations with like my manager and also like other, like staff engineer too on my team, and kind of talk with them about like kind of career development and just how to kind of get to the next level in terms of like being able to lead larger projects, like have a larger influence on the team, etc. So.
Yeah, I think I'll just probably echo everything that Juan and Helen said. Definitely play the mentor role with like new hires on the team and then interns, and kind of try to help them use the transition from like being a student to like a new hire. And then there's like a certain like on-ramping stuff that takes some getting used to. But then also play the mentee role as well. There's a lot of very smart people on my team who I learned from, and then we have like architects that are really experienced, kind of what like Juan was saying, where they think about like systems as a whole, and then we have to like work with them like very closely, and then so learning a lot from them. So yeah, I think it's just you're constantly teaching and learning, which is a good thing.
Awesome. And definitely, I'm sure y'all feel like you've come a long way since college time, and like reflecting on both the mentor and the mentee roles that you play in your role, it kind of transitions into how do you recommend that students that are interested in a SWE role spend their time right now, particularly at UT Austin?
I can chime in. During my time at UT, Michael Powell probably knows this, but I was involved in everything and anything there is to do with anything college related. I was in the Longhorn Band. I was a mentor for ECAC, or not ECAC, EOE, I just kind of threw myself in different situations, because every time that you throw yourself in different situations, you meet different people that have different skill sets. When I was in band, I learned a lot about leadership, and the leadership that I learned in band has been able to directly help me when I'm working with larger teams at my company. ECAC also provides a lot of useful information about how to interview. For us, we worry a lot about the technical portions, but when you're being interviewed, we're also testing your personal skills. So if you don't know how to communicate some of the things that you're talking about, that can like be detrimental. I did this with Michael Powell 3 times. I learned how to do professional etiquette dining with recruiters, and that happens all the time. Like whenever you do your first round, you will be talking to recruiters to network, and if you don't have good, etiquette eating, that can really detract recruiters. So I'm taking this more in a different kind of set, like work on your personal skills, because I know you guys are working on interviewing on a daily basis with like your classes and etc.
I guess I would also just suggest taking, like, if you really are interested in software, just trying to take those classes earlier, like trying to front load on that side. I think that will give you a leg up when you start doing interviews, just because you'll have heard all that, like before. So I think that's one thing. And then, yeah, like Juan said, just networking, like staying involved. Like I was in SWE and HKN when I was at UT, and just like having the leadership positions and stuff like that can kind of show that you are like willing to take initiative, maybe like stand out from other people.
Yeah, I would pretty much echo all of that. And then, yeah, I would say for me, one of the biggest courses that I took that had like a big influence on me was I took a software engineering course as like part of my coursework, which was something that was like completely new to me, because there they break you into teams, and then you do have to deal with like these different like team dynamics and stuff like that, which is something I wasn't quite as used to. We had stuff like pair programming and then shuffling around pairs, but then this was kind of here's an abstract problem, kind of like you get in the real world, and then just go solve it. And then there's not really a set specific criteria. Like there wasn't even like frameworks and stuff like that. And then having to do that and then work with like 10 different people and like different people's like personalities and stuff like that is, yeah, it was like really good. So.
Awesome. And so kind of taking the interpersonal skills that you've worked on all the way from college till now, can you reflect a little bit about how you deal with interpersonal conflict at work nowadays, kind of versus maybe the way that you think you would have done it wrong when you're younger, and like compare like the differences and how that is? And also just to change up the order, let's go Travis, Juan, and then Helen.
Now I can't echo what people are saying. Yeah, I would probably say, yeah, whenever I was younger, in terms of like interpersonal conflict, I was pretty, I would probably not bring it up as much. I would probably say that I was pretty non-confrontational about certain things like that. And I think one of the biggest like learning things for me, not in terms of just like conflict with others, but also like not only whenever I give critiques, but then I receive them as well, is like none of this stuff is like personal, and like everyone's trying to build like the best product and stuff like that. So I think that was probably the biggest like mind shift for me in terms of definitely giving critiques to people, because you obviously don't want to like hurt anyone's feelings, but then at the end of the day, everyone's trying to build the best product. So I think that was the biggest thing for me.
Yeah, I'll echo everything Travis said. No, I'm kidding.
Nice.
As I'm reflecting, when I first started, I definitely did not do well in this topic. Whenever you work in a professional environment, there are these things called code reviews. I did not know what a code review was until I guess I worked in my first internship, and the first code review I gave, or that I was, that I pushed and people gave feedback on, was horrible. And I took it in the worst way possible. Like, hey, what do you mean I write flawless code? Like, not whenever you think in that perspective, you're not receptive to learning new things, and you kind of like limit your growing opportunities. I talked to a mentor and I was like, hey man, I'm really having problem with code reviews. Like I'm getting killed. I think that this person has it out for me. I don't think they like me. Uh, so whenever I was able to kind of shift that mind where this person's trying to help me learn versus this person hates me, really helped me adjust the way that I performed at my job.
I think the biggest thing for me was like I was very shy in school. I didn't like talking to people. And I think like at my first job, you know, that was kind of like my biggest feedback is just like I would often be like too intimidated or too afraid to talk to like other people, like reach out to other people I didn't know. So I think that was sort of the biggest change. Now I think that maybe too far the opposite way, but yeah, just like, you know, feeling like, you know, this is part of my job. Like everyone's all on the same team. It's not like scary to reach out, or like I was also afraid to ask questions that sounded really dumb too. That was kind of like something I've sort of given up on. Like no one knows everything. Even like very senior engineers don't always know everything. So you don't have to like feel guilty or whatever for like asking something that you don't know. So.
Awesome. So y'all talked a little bit about inner workings of the dynamics within the companies you're at. And so within your current role, what is the your favorite thing, I'd say, like taking a step back, general, one of your most favorite things? I know it's hard to get like absolute. So one of your favorite things, and then also one of your least favorite things about the role that you're in right now.
Okay, I can go first. The thing that I enjoy the most about my job is communication. Even though that we are in like these COVID times, it doesn't really matter as software engineers because everyone, if you're a software engineer, all you need is a laptop and a webcam and you can work with anyone. So it really hasn't affected me in that respect. It's actually increased our communication. If since I can't just walk to someone's desk, Slack has been a great way to communicate. But apart from the whole COVID thing, I also enjoy collaborating with designers, PMs, and data scientists to release a feature. When you think about the amount of people that work on a feature, it's a lot of money. Like assume each person makes 50,000 in a team of 10. That's like $500,000 invested towards a feature. So before writing a feature, there's a lot of work on building a hypothesis and trying to determine how much revenue or money is this feature going to bring, and is it going to bring an uplift in customer satisfaction? So like I like those types of problems. What are we going to do as a company to basically make money? And if the company makes money, I make money through bonuses, right? So I really enjoy that part of work. The thing that I don't enjoy, um, in my history, I worked at IBM and Microsoft, which are huge companies. So there's a lot of process. And the last two companies I worked at, Postmates and RigUp, they're startups and they're polar opposites. So the thing that I have the most difficulty with is not having process. People hate it, but I actually feel like I love process. I like knowing that when I release a feature, there's a lot of gates that'll ensure that it's high quality code. So at a startup, we kind of like cut some corners because we don't have the resources that bigger companies do. So that's my personal take on what I don't like about my company, or at least my role in the company.
I know it's probably a toss of who goes next. So Helen, do you want to go next?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, it's one of the things I feel like, yeah, like we have like a pretty good culture where I am. I feel like, you know, everyone is like both like really hardworking, but also like really collaborative, like willing to help others out. And I feel like, you know, like very well supported, you know, like both by my managers or both by my manager and like my teammates. And I feel like I just like have a good relationship with everyone, and it just really kind of helps make the day like go by like easier. Just like knowing that like I enjoy working with these people and like we're all working towards like something that's like really impactful for our company as well. Something I don't like is just like we have some like growing pains of like scaling up and monolithic code bases, et cetera. Like just kind of you know, sometimes it can like feel a little bit frustrating, like everything is broken and it wasn't my fault, but like, you know, yeah, that's like kind of growing pains is like we kind of smooth out like scaling up and stuff. So
Yeah, for me, one of the things that I really enjoy about my current position is the team culture that I have like right now. So I think that in addition to just like working on interesting problems, like one of the really good things is being surrounded by a lot of like-minded people who have like the same like drive and initiatives as you. So I think that right now that I'm like working on like a really good team, and then everyone's kind of really striving to like build like the best product, and then no one's really trying to like phone it in or anything like that, which is like a really enjoyable thing, because everyone's trying to check in like the highest quality code, and then everyone kind of like checks their egos at the door and stuff like that in terms of code reviews, like Juan was talking about earlier. So I think that that's really enjoyable. And then from the not so enjoyable part, I would probably say meetings, even though I know they're a necessary evil, especially whenever you're trying to collaborate with a bunch of other teams in order to build like a larger product. But yeah, I don't quite enjoy them as much as writing code, but yeah.
Awesome. So we have 2 questions right now. There's one very contextual one. So Helen, if you want to address what a monolithic code base is.
Basically, so like we kind of have a thing where like once upon a time, like there was just like a single repo and like everyone committed to it when the team was really small, and then it grew really fast and everyone was still committing to the same repo, and it just kind of like creates a lot of dependency things, especially like, you know, it's like teams, like hundreds of people working in the same repo. You can imagine like there are conflicts, even though there's like, you have like different services, but yeah, just kind of overall like trying to split those out into like actual like microservices at least. So like, you know, like this code related to this specific area is like running separately from like everything else, and like there's like clear ownership too for like who owns what piece of the code. That I think is very important, just because like if there is an issue, like you need to be able to like get to the right person instead of just being like, we don't know who owns this, it was written 5 years ago, no one knows anything about it anymore. So just kind of like moving away from that is still kind of a little bit painful. It's a painful process, I would say.
Yeah, when the person that wrote the code base is already gone, I bet that could be difficult.
Yeah. And this is like I think it's a very common problem, especially for like companies like within the last 10 years or so. It's just like initially they just like kind of went like full like gung-ho kind of thing, and yeah, now they're kind of like paying for it. So
yeah, and I'll kind of add to that. My company, we just rewrote our entire monolithic code base, and we rewrote all of it to microservices and micro front ends. So there was a huge pain point with working with this old code base. So we just decided to let's scrap it all and rewrite the entire code base in modern languages. So yeah, monolithic code bases can be very difficult to diagnose because of the reason you mentioned. If the person that wrote it left, it's hard to see like what was supposed to happen.
Great. So I'm going to transition a little bit. We're going to take this question in the chat right after this one, because I feel like they'll go well sequentially. So the first one is, what are some common mistakes that you see candidates make in a technical interview?
I guess I can go first this time. Yeah, I think like the most common one is just like not talking as you're coding. I think it's just really hard for the interviewer to just gauge even like what you're thinking. Are you stuck? Are you like trying to decide between 2 different things? Like, do you even understand the question? You know, stuff like that. So just like, as long as you're, you know, kind of talking and at least saying like, oh, I'm kind of deciding between this, like kind of narrating as you go. I think that's like one of the biggest things. And then 2 is like also choosing a language you don't know that well to do your interview in. I think that ends up backfiring. Like you may think like, oh, Python like looks really simple, but like if you've never written Python that much, then like I think it's like you need to definitely like practice in the language that you are interviewing in. Yeah, like last week I had some guy who was he like wrote Java most of the time, but then was like, oh, I do C++ for interviews. But it was clear he had not written in C++ for a very long time and just was like looking up syntax for everything. It was just a very painful process, even though like it was clear he knew a lot. It just like wasn't able to show through.
One of the biggest things that I personally see are candidates that are, so whenever I interview a candidate, I also try to assess whether or not they'd be a good coworker of mine or not. So if I see that the candidate is struggling, I try to help. Like, hey, I know you don't have Google. We all use Google in our everyday life. So if they say, oh, I forgot the name of the function or something, I'll try to help them out. There are some candidates that are not very collaborative when I'm trying to help them. Like, no, I got it. Don't tell me anything. So whenever I see those types of responses to me trying to help, it's not I'm trying to make you fail. It's I'm trying to help you succeed, and I'm also trying to determine whether or not I like to work with you. So, like I said, personal skills are very important in an interview. And I think that a lot of candidates don't really um, come to the interviews prepared for those types of situations.
Yeah, and if you want to add to that, Travis, go ahead. But if not, just let me know.
Yeah, I can just add to it really quickly. Yeah, for me, the biggest thing is communication as well. In particular, I think asking like clarifying questions, because I feel like a lot of times candidates think that it might be used against them. But I think that usually your mileage may vary because all interviewers are different, but I feel like usually it's being used as to see whether you will ask clarifying questions or not. So a lot of times interviewers like to leave a lot of things ambiguous, and they like to see if you will probe deeper to see whether or not certain things that you're assuming are actually like fact. So that would be the biggest thing for me, is like making sure you have a thorough understanding of the problem before coding it and asking any clarifying questions, and then trying to limit the amount of like gotchas that pop up while you're coding it. Because I think it's always better to, while you're walking and discussing the problem with the interviewer, and then being like, oh, there's an issue with this, maybe I can do this. It's always better to catch it earlier than rather you've been coding for 15 minutes and then something pops up, and then now you need to either completely pivot your algorithm or try to patch it. So that would be it for me.
Awesome. Those are some great pieces of advice. So now there's a pretty specific question in the chat, and this will, I think, be the last question before we transition towards y'all's prepared interview questions to go over examples. So this one in the chat is, to prepare for technical interviews, what level of LeetCode algorithmic questions, easy, medium, or hard, and what topics, hash maps, array strings, etc., do you recommend that we study?
I can go first. Whenever you are applying for a company, the company typically has different rounds. The first round is typically a video interview, and at least if I'm trying to look at the companies I've interviewed for in the past, most of the time it's been between easy to medium LeetCode question. The expectation in the hour interview is to take the first 15 minutes to ask about your resume. We want to know more about you. And then the last 45 minutes is typically reserved for an interview question. If we try doing a hard question, that would probably be too much for that 45-minute allotted time. If you do well for the video interview and you do an on-sites are typically ranging between medium and hard. And the reason that there are some hard is we use those hard ones to kind of calibrate what level you should be brought into. So if someone is a rock star, they get all the hard and medium, we of course are going to give them a senior position. But if they don't really get the hard ones, but they do solid and medium, it's debatable if they can be a software engineer or software engineer too. As far as what topics to kind of go over, the most popular ones are, I'm a JavaScript developer, but if we're thinking just general data structures, maps are pretty big. Knowing the runtime of an object, like you can retrieve a key pretty fast. So you would of course need to know how maps work, how to add stuff to it, how to retrieve, how to clean up after you're using your maps. Graphs are also pretty big. How do you do breadth first search or depth first search? You do that a lot when you're trying to traverse between different data points. And I think the last one is binary tree. Even in the front end worlds, whenever you're looking at a web page, the web page is built upon a tree structure. So knowing how to traverse down and up, traversing up or down trees are pretty important regardless of what position you go into. And then Vinay asked a great question. When I'm talking about calibration, I'm talking about full-time roles. when you are looking for an intern position, you usually don't get calibrated. You just get put as an intern. So you don't have to worry too much about that part of the phrase that I talked about.
I guess I can go next. Interviews medium hard. I would say probably mostly medium. Like I think they probably don't expect too much from people who've just had a few years, you know. I think mostly for that. Like I think for interns, for me, it's like the questions are probably like easy medium, and then just like kind of making sure, like just kind of seeing like their personal, interpersonal skills and stuff like that. Just like whether they're like enthusiastic about the company or whatever. For me, yeah, like I feel like I don't think I've seen too many actual like leak code hard like algorithmic questions. I think like medium is generally good enough, and then for like more senior roles, they'll ask you for like system design interviews more so than like like very complex algorithms that like don't actually come into play like in everyday usage. It also depends like company to company. Like smaller companies would probably be more geared towards like can you implement code well, like how's your actual coding skills versus like do you know these complex algorithms. And then something like Google or like Facebook, they might be more interested in like do you really know these different algorithms and stuff like that. So I think it kind of varies a little bit. And then yeah, topics, all those things mentioned are great. Trees, like Juan mentioned, and just really like knowing the time complexity and like difference between them, I think is really important.
Yeah, yeah, pretty much, yeah, agree with all of that. I think with a lot of this stuff that you'll find with interviewing, which can be a little frustrating, is like your mileage may vary. It's very dependent on who you're interviewing for. So certain companies are looking for a lot of stuff. And if you're really passionate about a company, you can like Google what are popular interview questions that they might be asking, and then like, oh, this company does ask a lot of tree questions, and then maybe really study up on trees. So that's one way that you can kind of get around that. But then yeah, it's also really dependent on interviewers as well. So it's not just the company. So a lot of these companies allow the interviewer to make up any question that they want. So it's really dependent on who you happen to get as well. And then yeah, for the questions, I would say mostly yeah, probably start on like the leak code with like the easy ones, and then work your way up to the medium, and then work on transition between easy and medium quite a bit. I think that hard, yeah, it probably wouldn't typically come up. But also Google, they might like to probe you on that. So it might, if depending on the company, you might want to explore a few of those. But I think definitely like easy and medium are things that pop up quite a bit. And then typically, I think you should probably breathe a sigh of a little bit of a relief. If you are getting really hard questions, that's typically a good sign that you're doing really well, because you're kind of cruising through these easier questions. And then a lot of times interviewers will just throw a very difficult thing at you, and they have no expectation that you're going to solve it. And they just want to see, okay, how do they deal with unknowns and frustration and a just very difficult thing, and they want to see how you think. So I would say that even if you do get a really hard one, it could be a very good sign that you're doing well in the interview, and they're not going to bother asking you an easier question. So.
Just wanted to add like one more thing about lead code too. I think it's much more important to understand like why for these questions, not just like try to memorize it or anything like that. I think it's really important to just like understand like why, because I think like most interviewers know that lead code exists, right? So like they'll try to maybe like switch up something about the questions. It won't be exactly what you saw on lead code. So I think it's just like yeah, like when you like go through a question, just like make sure you understand like what's actually going on, like how you can kind of like adjust to different scenarios.
Awesome. So we're going to use the next 20 minutes for y'all to go through your prepared questions, the interview questions. So I think the screen sharing should be open. I think, Helen, you're going to go first with this.
Oh, I did not think I was going to do that, but that's fine. I can start.
Okay.
Yeah. So let me start.
Surprise, Helen, you're starting.
Yeah.
Michael told me that.
Okay. Am I sharing? Okay. let me gather. Yeah, so I was just going to go over kind of like a very simplified question of like something that might involve like data structures. So can y'all see that? Okay, so yeah, so like this is just create a time-based key value store class time map that supports two operations. One is setting with a key, setting the key like with the value and timestamp, and then retrieving that, like getting the value at that for that key at that exact timestamp. So kind of looking at this, you know, the first thing I would do is sort of ask like the clarifying questions. You know, what kind of inputs are the keys and values? For now, we can just assume strings. For timestamp, like maybe they want the real timestamp. I'm just going to go with an int for simplicity. And then, yeah, just like kind of checking the edge cases, you know, so like, you know, what happens if you do find an exact match, what happens if you don't. So like, let's just say that like, this is what, like they say, oh, just return nothing if there's not an exact match. So then kind of after you've assessed the question and like understood like kind of the edge cases and like what inputs and outputs are, that's when you would probably like spend a little bit of time thinking about how you might approach the problem. I think one of the biggest mistakes too is people just like jump right in, like start coding. They're like, oh, I understand, like, let me just write it down. And I think it's definitely worthwhile to spend a few minutes just like thinking about it, like writing it down, just so also that the interviewer knows that you are actually thinking about it and not just like winging it. And also like if you kind of do it too fast, sometimes they're suspicious that maybe you've already seen this problem or something like that. So just kind of give the air that you're being thoughtful about it. So like maybe for this, you think like, oh, and I guess like another clarifying question would be like, can there be multiple values for a key as long as they have different timestamps? So for this case, I would say yes. So given that, like maybe your first thought is something like, oh, I want to store value and timestamps as like pairs for a specific key. So something like, you know, key, we have like TS1, L1, TS2, L2. And so then when you're thinking about that, I think it's like also good to like kind of do a runtime check just to before, because that's usually important. And if you talk about that early, I think that's also a good sign to the interviewer. So for this case, you know, set would be O of 1, but then get, because you'd like have to traverse through an array, then get would be O of n to like find a match. And so then you might think like, okay, how can I maybe optimize this? So like, since we know that it only matters if it's exact match, that's kind of a sign that maybe you should just use like another hash like within that. So something more like TS1, value 1, TS2. And so this would give you, you know, like constant time for both set and also like constant time for get. So kind of like given that, you can kind of maybe check with the interviewer, just like, you know, does this make sense? And then you can kind of go and start coding. So in this case, they asked for like class time map. So it's like starting off. I know like inside I want like a data structure. I'm gonna use default dict with a dict. So this is basically a map within a map. Have to import collections as well. And then kind of like following the things that they asked for, you know, you would do set key value timestamp. And then they also wanted a get with key timestamp. Then so yeah, for set, like, you know, you would, you know, key, yeah, so like key at the timestamp, we want to set this value so that later on, like, we can retrieve it. And so then like the next step after you think that looks good, you would like write some tests for it. This is something that like I think is also just like very important. It's like not only can you write the code, can you write the accompanying test to go with it? Like, are you thinking about the different edge cases and stuff? Some people just like would do something like val and like set it at time 1. And then they would print so then, yeah, like run it, print val, and like some people will be like, okay, I'm done. And I think that's like a pretty big red flag, you know, it's like shows that you kind of didn't think through like some of the edge cases. So like, for example, if I had just done like set, or like if I had done key like on something that like a thing that didn't exist, you know, like we'll quickly find out that there was like an error in my solution. So kind of being able to like go back and then be like, okay, if not in self. So like, you know, after this should be able to work. And so, yeah, I think like more so than like writing perfect code, I think it's really just about like being able to like identify your mistakes when they do happen and like being able to debug and correct it. Like over here, like if I was like struggling to understand like what was wrong with it, I think, or like yeah, basically like as if I can like identify what is wrong with it very quickly, I feel like, you know, interviewers are like see that as a positive versus like if you, I've like, yeah, seen some people like struggle with like syntax or whatever, and they can't understand like the debug errors or like the errors basically. And so it's like kind of a struggle for them. Eventually I have to like give them a hint. So like if you are like self-sufficient on debugging your own code, I feel like that's like a really good sign. So can add like a few more cases, like what if you do a wrong key? And then, like say we set a second value at the same time, and then try to get that, then like we would expect, so going through this, like I would expect this to be val, this would be none, this would also be none, and then this would be like val 2. And so, yeah, like that's kind of like a pretty simple example of like how you might do it. And then usually like kind of also what happens too is that they'll like kind of maybe like make the problem harder. So like maybe instead of returning nothing, if there's exact match, they'll be like, okay, return like the latest value that is before the timestamp. And so in this case, you would think like, oh, okay, so then now I actually have to like keep a sorted list of all these timestamps, and then that probably like lead back to like this, like you know, storing tuples or some sort of array of like the timestamps, and then if you can like, you can ask if like they're added in increasing order, and that would kind of be a sign for you to be able to like use binary search or something like that to be able to improve that. So yeah, that's kind of like just a simple example from my side.
Awesome. And I think we're now going to transition to Juan and Travis's question. I think they prepared something together. So if y'all want to share your screen.
Yeah, sure. I'll share my screen and then Travis can get started.
Yeah, so I think, yeah, we're going to kind of run through like a mock interview here. So I'm going to be the interviewer, and then one's going to be the interviewee, and then we're going to walk through a question, and then with probably some running commentary on maybe things that he's doing correct and things he's not doing correct. And then, yeah, so for this first question, Juan, let's try to write a method that will return basically true or false. Given a binary tree as input, it will return true or false if it conforms to a binary search tree or not.
So Juan's not saying anything, which is very suspicious.
Yeah, so one of the things that we definitely look for here is, yeah, Juan has gone ahead and like kind of started typing, so didn't ask any like clarifying questions or anything like that. And then even if he does know the solution right away, I think it's always a good thing to kind of explain what your thought process is before you even start coding, because there could be some kind of flaw in your thinking or some kind of gotcha that could expose itself before you begin coding. And catching this stuff as early on is probably always the best thing, because it's like a limited time that you have to interview as well. So catching anything that you can before you start coding is always a good thing.
Oh my goodness, I'm so sorry. Thanks for letting me know. Whenever you said that, I realized that I'm actually trying to solve a different type of problem. This doesn't have anything to do with graphs, does it?
No, it does not. No.
It's even in the functioning. I'm so sorry. Okay, let me step back a little bit and think about this. So a tree, I think, has a left and a right node, right? I think yes. If I'm going back to my fundamentals, a binary tree is a structure that has a node. So can I please ask just for some clarifications? I think that a node has three different properties. It can either have a left node, a right node, or value. Is that a correct assumption?
Yeah, I think that sounds good for this problem. Yeah, you can probably go ahead and assume that you have some kind of data structure like that.
Okay, and I think that in a tree, the left children are smaller and a right, everything on the right is bigger. So let me quickly show you what I think, and then let's see if it works out. So I have a root node here, 100, and then anything to the left is smaller, and then everything to the right. So based off of this, is this a good assumption of what a binary tree will look like?
Yes, yeah, so that's good, yeah.
Okay, I am gonna get right. I'm so sorry about this graph code. I'm gonna erase all of this. So what I'm gonna do to determine if a binary tree is valid is I'm gonna check if the left node's data is greater. So I'm gonna verify that the left part of the tree is correct. If this does not satisfy that condition, I'm gonna return false. And I'm gonna do this same type of logic, but I'm gonna do it on the right side. So I'm gonna return false. And I know with binary trees, there's a lot of recursion that happens. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna recurse through the left side of the binary tree and then on the right side of the binary tree. And these are gonna be my base case statements. So bear with me, please. Let me write this really quick. So I'm gonna traverse through the left, and then I'm gonna traverse to the right side. So if my assumption or my base cases are incorrect, I'm going to assume that this is an invalid binary tree. And I should be good here. If it doesn't go into this false, that means that it is a valid tree. So let me go through this again really quick, just so I can make sure you understood everything. What I'm gonna do here is I'm gonna return false if the right is greater than the current node. So I'm looking into the left node's data, and I'm gonna do the same exact thing, but on the left side. And then I'm gonna recurse through both sides of the tree and determine if it is valid. Perfect, this is it. I think this works.
Okay. Do you want to maybe like walk through it with a couple like test cases or anything, or?
Yeah, that's a good point. Let me give that a try. Okay, so I can call this. There's this JavaScript function where I can assert. So if the tree's head is equal to true. So let's do an example of a tree. I'm gonna assume, can I assume that there's a tree already there for me? I don't want to have to write the entire tree. Can I assume that this creates it for me?
Yeah, definitely.
Okay. And actually, JavaScript, I'm just gonna import a tree so I can facilitate some of my testing. Okay, so I'm just gonna run this. This is going to work. Oh, what? Oh my goodness. Here, let me look at this error and try to see what I did wrong. Oh, can you give me a root that is null?
Yeah, I think that would be a valid input, that that the root of the tree would be null.
Okay, I wish you would have told me that, but we'll figure it out. So if it was null, I'm gonna return. I can assume that an empty node or an empty tree is gonna be true. You know what? I forgot this is another one of my base cases.
Mhm.
So I not only do I have one, I have three different base cases. So based off of the error I just caught, I should probably also check that the nodes that I'm checking are not null, because that's the error that I got here. So let me just do that really quick and I should be good to go. So perfect. So this works. Let me actually try adding some data points, just so that you have a good understanding of the type of tree I'm going to test. I'm going to test this tree. It's going to have 150, 150, and then let's do 25 to kind of spice things up. And then let's add 200. No, actually, I'll just leave it at this. So what my algorithm is going to check is that this particular tree is correct. So
Okay.
let me add those nodes, and I'm assuming that this library I'm using does everything like I want it to. So let me just add those nodes. 50, 150, 25. So I'm gonna run this, and perfect. My main application works. I am done with the interview. Do you have any questions for me?
Yeah, so I think that you did a good job here. So I think
I did take a lot of classes with about trees, so thanks.
yeah, I think it's really good that you jumped to recursion when seeing this problem, and then handling the null root, and then assuming that a null tree is a binary tree. I could see it going either way, but I like that you're assuming that that it is one. Probably makes the recursion a little bit nicer. Can we try your code with a sample input of where the leftmost node, where the 50, its right child is, let's say 200.
Let me see. So, So no, my code would not be able to handle that. Well, technically a 200 is supposed to be over here, right?
Mhm.
Binary tree, all. If we look at the node, if we look at the trees as just separate entities, this is correct.
Mhm.
This is correct. But if we look at the entire tree, that's incorrect, because this fifth or this 200, no, I totally messed up on that one. I don't think that my algorithm works with that. I think I may have a different solution. Is it okay if I kind of talk this one out?
Yeah. Take your time. Yeah.
Okay. So my algorithm is not going to be able to check that edge case very well, and it'll return false. I remember going through something once upon a time. There are different types of traversals. I don't know the exact name for this, if I'm being honest, but I know that there is a particular type of traversal that gets you the binary trees from the lowest to the biggest amounts.
Mhm.
I think it's something like that: 150, 25, 200, 150. Oh, in order traversal.
Mhm. Okay.
So I think that if I use in order traversal, I can traverse the tree and then check it with an actual solution. Sorry, my mind is having a lot of thoughts, so I'm just going to code it up if you don't mind. I'm going to erase all of this. Do I need to keep this on my screen, or can I just delete it?
You can delete it if you
Okay,
want. Yeah.
Well, actually, I'm gonna just comment this out just in case I mess this interview up. So here is my second implementation. I'm gonna erase all of this, but this time I'm gonna go through in-order traversal. And
Mhm.
in-order traversal should return to me the tree in a sorted manner from lowest to greatest.
Okay.
So let's give this a try. So you're not gonna fool me this time. I remembered about the null part. So I have my edge case there. If there's no node, I'm just gonna return from this traversal. And the way that in-order traversal works is first we go through all of the left children. We go, oh, but then how am I gonna give you an answer? I
Mhm.
know how to do it. I'm gonna put all of the results in an array. So I'm gonna call this just a buffer, and this buffer is gonna hold all of my results. I'm just gonna pass it in here. I'm gonna pass in buffer recursively, so I keep getting that data. And then I'm going to push that data value into that buffer. So let me see. So in-order traversal is pretty easy. You traverse all the way to the left, you print the value, then you go all the way to the right, and then you print the value. And
Mhm.
you'll be guaranteed to get all of the binary tree values in order. So let me give this a try. I don't know if this is gonna work, but I'm gonna give it my best. So I'm going to call is valid binary tree with the entire tree, and let's see what I get. Okay, I forgot my buffer. I forgot to include this variable. And I apologize if you don't know JavaScript, but it hopefully isn't too bad. Okay, so I am not getting anything here. Let's look at my function. Oh, I think I know why. This line is failing. Okay, so I'm gonna call this function, and then at the end of this function, I should be able to see my entire buffer since I'm pushing to it. So let's call this again. I'm getting undefined. Let me take a look and see. So, oh, I need to pass in the head, not the entire tree. Ah, there we go. So based off of the tree we had without this, it gave it to me in order. So I can assume that with in-order traversal, I'll be able to determine whether or not it's sorted or not. So fast forward a minute, and I actually implemented this isSorted function. This isSorted function is going to tell me whether or not the buffer that I have is sorted. So let's call this function. So I'm gonna determine whether or not this buffer is sorted. Does that make sense? What I'm doing? I'm sorry. I'm talking out loud, but I want to make sure that it's making sense.
Yeah, I think I'm following along. So basically, where you have this tree, you're doing an in-order traversal. You're kind of storing the nodes as you go in the hopes that they will be sorted if this is a binary search tree. And then at the end, you're kind of just confirming whether or not after you visit all these nodes that it's in sorted order.
Cool. Can you put that in my interview notes? Everything you just said, because that sounded perfect. And I think I'm done. I feel pretty confident about my solution. Ignore that error that just happened, but I think that this solution works. I can, since in order always traverses from lowest to greatest, I can check at the end. If it's sorted, that means that it's a valid binary tree. This is my final solution.
Okay, could we maybe talk about like the complexity of it a little bit in terms of the space and time complexity?
Yeah, well, I mean, it's 8:10 p.m., so it was pretty complex to like do this interview question. It's a little late.
Yeah,
Oh,
I agree.
oh, you said time. Oh, sorry, I thought you meant like the actual time. Yeah, let me look. So according to this, is I'm traversing through a tree. I think my I'm not very good at this. I'm gonna be honest, but I think my traversal is O(n) because I'm going through O(n) elements. Oh, did you also ask for space complexity?
Yes.
I don't think that's going to be good. I'm using this buffer. So that I'm creating a whole nother array for the same number of elements.
Okay.
Do you
Yeah,
mind-
I think that that's fine for the first go through. But is there any way that maybe we could improve that a little bit?
Yeah, I think I have a way to do this. Let me think about this. So instead of using another array, I could probably just use a pointer that points to the previous array. Okay, do you mind if I just code this up real quick? I think I have enough time.
Yeah. Go for it.
So here I'm gonna have a pointer to the previous node, and I'm gonna get rid of this buffer so I can reduce my space complexity. So I'm gonna comment this out really quick. So first of all, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna rewrite this a little bit. So if I have a node, I'm gonna once again do a traversal of this. What I'm gonna check is, if this is not a valid binary tree, going to the left. So I'm still doing that same traversal for in order, but I'm gonna kind of split it up a little bit. So if it is not a valid binary tree, going to the left, this is where that previous node kind of comes into play. Let me just type this up. I think it'll make sense whenever I actually get to the next part. Okay, so here so this is another way of writing like the sorting method. I'm checking, is the current node that I have greater than the previous one? And if it is, that means it's a valid solution. So where do I assign the previous node? Oh, I'm gonna assign it here. Okay, let me try this. So I'm gonna recursively call this, oh, sorry about that, to the right. I wanna make a few points real quick. So I'm still doing the in order traversal. And as you can see, first I'm recursing to the left, and then I'm gonna recurse to the right. But in the middle, I'm checking to see the current node that I'm at. Hey, are you greater than the node to the left? If you're not, I'm gonna return false. And then here, I'm just updating the pointer as I'm progressing through the tree. So if I kind of have this little diagram here, the first time I iterate all the way to the left, which is what this is doing, I'm getting the number 25. And then the next time that my recursive function gets called, it's going to get called with a 50. This is going to be my current node, and this is going to be my pointer to the previous. So in this line of code in 14, I'm checking, is my node's data less than or equal to the previous node's data? And this will determine whether or not it is in a sorted fashion. And then the same thing's going to happen. The previous node's going to get updated. So I think I have a valid solution. What do you think about this?
Yeah, I think it looks pretty good. Are you happy with it?
It took me a little while to get here, but I was able to reduce the complexity to O of 1. No longer am I creating a new array. I'm just keeping a pointer to the last one, so I don't have to keep playing around with data. But based off of everything that we went over, I feel pretty confident that my testing will pass. And look, my assertions worked, so I feel pretty good about it. Do you have any questions for me?
No, I think that's pretty much it.
Okay, so that concludes the interview that we just went over. It was, of course, very highly dramatized. I hope that you guys were able to kind of pinpoint some of the things that I was trying to make obvious. Travis, do you want to kind of point anything out? Or?
Yeah, so I think, yeah, one of the things that Juan was doing is like something that he was kind of like getting his legs under him as he went as well, where he kind of started off a little bit rocky with terms of like not coding or not asking clarifying questions, and then just kind of start coding. And then as he's discovering issues, then like bringing them up. And then that's one of the things that interviewers look for, where it's like, make sure that you have a very thorough understanding of the problem. And then one of the things that he was able to clarify was, he kind of brought up, oh, I kind of remember what a binary tree is. Let me confirm my understanding of that, and let me confirm my understanding of a binary search tree. And that's one of the things that I think we were discussing earlier, where even if you weren't sure of it, I think that, again, your mileage may vary, but I think that that's okay for a lot of interviewers, because they want to make sure that you have a thorough understanding, and they realize that, well, maybe you don't deal with a binary search tree every single day. And then so it's more about, are you going to confirm your understanding of the problem before working on it? And then if you're unsure of it, maybe clarifying it before you kind of like go like head in. And then as we started like working through the problem, then he started doing like a lot more communicating, writing tests to ensure that it was behaving as expected. So yeah.
Great. These were some really fun examples. I think everybody who was watching was really sucked in. I know I was like, it was really fun. It was really entertaining for both.
I forgot to say, Juan, you're hired. You're hired.
That was be my next question. Would he be hired in this situation? Yeah. And I think this gave like two very, you know, good examples, because I think for Helen's example, a lot of questions often are pretty short. Maybe it's like a recording question where you just have to explain the short and sweet question, get through that round, and then that would be something more of like the final round or like the next round after that. So I feel like that was a really good two set sample. And so now at this point, if everybody's if you need to drop off, like go ahead. But I think we still have 13 minutes off scheduled for this. So for the remaining people here, this is a perfect opportunity to just unmute yourself, ask questions. This is like, I don't know if you'll ever get an opportunity with such a small group to ask exactly what you're looking for. So this is a great opportunity. I highly recommend take advantage of this and ask any questions that you have.
Sure. So if I could ask a question real quick, as someone who's I'll just go ahead. I already posted this in the chat, but I'll just go ahead and read it off. As someone who struggles with lead code questions, honestly, beyond easy and sometimes even easy, how would you recommend getting good enough at them to pass technical software interviews? I'm a junior, by the way, so I'm looking for internships. And also, do you recommend memorizing code for like very basic algorithms like tree traversals and so on, just so that you could apply them in a bunch of different situations?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. What I do when I'm about to interview is I do a pretty deep dive on all my data structures and really try to understand how they work, what utility functions they have. So for example, a tree, you have the ability to add a node, you can remove a node, and try to build out that data structure yourself. I actually recommend against trying to memorize a solution, because if I notice that someone's doing something from memory, it's obvious, like they're not talking, they're kind of just, you know, like it seems very robotic. So what I do is I ask them kind of like a, what do you call it? Like I throw them a bone to kind of reshift the way that I ask the question. Like, hey, I noticed that you solved it this way, but I'm going to tweak it so you have to solve it a different way. So if you have something memorized, you won't have the capability to adjust as the interviewer asks you to go different directions, if that makes sense. But I would memorize a couple of them, like really the concepts. Like, why do we recurse? Like, why is it important to go recursively down a tree? Or why do we do breadth first search when we're traversing a graph? So like understanding those concepts are more important than memorizing the actual code. Because like I can ask you, can you write this in JavaScript? You'll be like, oh, I only know Java, what do I do? So, you know, concepts are more important than memorization.
Yeah, I would just recommend like practicing a lot, you know, just like even if you feel like it's really simple, you know, like trying it once, like kind of going back and through and just kind of like analyzing yourself, like where could I have gone better, like try writing it you know, more efficient way. And I think also just like, yeah, like during interviews, or yeah, I would like, one would not recommend memorizing any code, but it's like you can also just like write something enough that it's basically ingrained in your memory, versus just like trying to like, you know, just like look at the code, stare at it, whatever. Like I think it's fine if you like have it like by memory, like in your hands kind of thing, like can type it like that. But yeah, like I also think just like you if you don't like have like the most perfect solution, like I think it's okay. Like as long as you can kind of get through the solution, you know, that's like a pretty good starting point. And then maybe it'll come to you like, oh, there was a faster way to do this, or the interviewer like will see that at least like you attempted something, and then like can kind of help you push along from there. And then I think it just doesn't hurt to like try interviewing, you know, like with like different places, and just kind of like get your feet wet there too. So like I think a lot of people also just get really nervous during interviews. So it's like, even if you've prepared a lot for it, like there's nothing that replaces like actually doing it. So I think, you know, definitely wouldn't recommend starting with like the company you really, really want first, but you know, like, you know, maybe some companies you haven't heard of, like it's worth a shot, and like maybe you'll end up really liking them anyways. So.
Yeah, I was just going to add to that real quick. I think that, yeah, the more you practice, a lot of stuff will become repetitious, and it will almost be like you are memorizing it. But I think the important thing is memorizing concepts, if that makes sense, because you're not really memorizing it, you're learning it, but then you can kind of think of it as memorizing it, because like the example that we just did right now, Juan, where he was able to do an in-order traversal of a tree. So he basically knew that, oh, I'm at my current node, I visit the left, and then I visit myself, and then I visit the right. And then like him being able to recall that, I think was the more important thing. So, I mean, at the end of the day, you do need to know how to write it, but I think that being able to like, be able to brush up on some of the basics of these data structures, like both Juan and Helen were saying, where it's like, okay, with trees, I know that I have these different types of traversals, and then knowing the concept of how you can do it, and then practicing it quite a bit, because you do still have to apply it. But hopefully that part isn't as difficult as once you understand it, because when you're thinking about it, it's like, okay, I visit my child, I visit me, then I visit the right. So hopefully that makes the coding easier.
Yeah, thank you guys. And Juan, by the way, you said you did a deep dive on your data structures and the utilities. Which structures are those, and does that depend on like what company you're theoretically like would be interviewing for? Like,
Yeah, that's a good question. What I typically do is, like, I do what Helen and Travis said. I do practice, and I practice over and over and over. And you're gonna start to see that a lot of questions start kind of look the same. They all have a very core concept of, oh, this is just a traversal question, but it has a whole bunch of fluff in it. When I talk about some of the core like APIs, just know like what the docs say about the tree. Um, so I'm a front end developer, so I can't think of all of them like right now, and I'm not in interviewing phase right now. But like maps have a get and a set method, right? So you should at least know those. If you're using Python, how do you set or get? If you're using Java, how does that work? How do you extend a class so you have these functionalities? So just really understanding those basic functions will go a long way.
okay, thank you.
So I actually was kind of wondering, for the difference between interviewing for full-time and interns, is there a big difference in what you're looking for, or kind of like what the expectations are, or what you'd recommend the process be?
I
So
mean,
go ahead, Helen.
I think like the difference between like full-time as like a new grad versus interns is probably like going to be relatively similar, just because like you don't have like a ton of work experience necessarily, so they're kind of like, the full-time will be like more in-depth, like there'll probably be more rounds or something like that, like more behavioral interview esque stuff. But I would say like the difference between like new grad intern versus like a more senior person is just like, yeah, like being able to pull on your past experience and like talk about like problems you solve, like show that you've actually like kind of learned stuff on the job, like be able to tackle harder problems. So yeah, like I think interns and like full-time, it's, or new grads, it's more just like, do you have the potential to be like someone that like we can, you know, really turn into a great engineer kind of thing, versus like, are you already a good engineer that can like help with like, you know, mentoring younger people, etc. So
Yeah, the only thing that I'll add to Helen is, one of the biggest things that I look for is this person coachable? That's really it. I know that interns, you guys don't have the full knowledge to work on, you know, some of these bigger problems, but based off of my 1 hour with this person, can I coach them and are they willing to learn? Those are like really the biggest things that I look for interns. And then if you're going to full-time position, I also expect those two things, but also expect the candidate to be able to explain the problem that they have in front of them and try to get a working solution. Like, if it's a working solution, great. But if it's not, how close were they to getting it? And what skills were they able to show off while we were interviewing?
Yeah, I was just going to add to that. Yeah, so for me, I would say that for the technical part, I'm more or less probably looking for the same thing. I typically would ask the same type of questions. Maybe for someone who's a new hire versus an intern, maybe a little bit more maturity with the data structures and algorithms. So maybe doing like a different type of spin on a problem and then seeing how they can tackle it. And then for me, I feel like definitely one of the bigger things is more behavioral with especially new hires in particular, because I think one of the important things to realize is you're not just like interviewing for a job. So the people who are working with you, they are looking at you. Can I work with this person? And then one of the things that I really enjoy whenever I'm interviewing a candidate, and it is important for interns, but it's really important for new hires as well, because that's someone that you're looking to work with for years, hopefully. And then so one of the things that I look for is whenever I am interviewing them with a technical problem, I like the rapport whenever we're kind of just working on this problem together. Obviously, I'm letting them take the lead because I already know the solution, but I definitely look for the rapport and then try to make it not as stale of an environment. So maybe they do run into like a little bit of a wall, and then they throw out like a little bit of a joke, like Juan was doing when we were interviewing right there. And then that does actually help in some circumstances, because like they are looking at, well, do I want to work with this person every single day? And then I think that that's like very, very important for new hires.
Yeah, I think humor is a huge thing it's a big part of my life, and I think it's a great thing for everybody. And like, I guess even my internships, I noticed that just like having a good time with things, like at stand-ups or even just like small talk, it makes a really big difference for like the team flow. And I can totally see how that would make a bigger deal once you're at a full time. And it's like you're working with these people for years, because I think people often like compare it to like almost like a family, right? Like a small like working family for years. So that's big. So I think we're running at the last minute here. So if anybody has any final burning questions, anything else, but I just want to take a minute to say thank you so much to y'all for coming out. I know you have your day jobs. I know you're full-on adults, which we are not. And so you got a lot of responsibilities, a lot of things to think about, bills and stuff, scary stuff. And so doing all those things and taking the time to prepare for this and really put a lot of energy, even with a relatively low turnout. We really appreciate that. And we'd love to maybe see you in the future for another event or something like that, because this is great. I think this is awesome content, and we're excited to upload this and share it out to the rest of the members who didn't get a chance to see it live. So thank you so much. This is a great experience, and I had a good time. I'm pretty sure everybody else who stuck around did as well.
I want to thank all of the alumni again for coming out. Just as Jacob said, you took extra time in your day, in your life, to share this, and I'm glad that it is recorded, because then I think more people will get to benefit from it. And Jacob, thank you again. You did a great job moderating.
All right. So now I got to make sure that I actually capture the recording. I don't want to accidentally lose it. Okay.